Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's Emerging Leaders Institute information session. My name is Melissa Bostrom, and I am the Assistant Dean for Graduate Student Professional Development in the Graduate School, and I direct the Emerging Leaders Institute. And pardon me while I just admit a couple of folks who are still joining us. While we get started here, I am delighted, and in just a moment, we'll be able to introduce our panel of alumni of the Emerging Leaders Institute who are here to share their perspectives with us today. But I wanted to, before we get there, just share with you kind of a broad overview of the program and so answer some questions about logistics that I know folks have had in the past. And then we will move on and introduce our panelists and have time for questions and answers with them. So that is our plan for today. Again, welcome to those of you just joining us, and we'll go ahead and get started. So the goals of the Emerging Leaders Institute, which is a program open to graduate students in the graduate school, as well as postdoctoral scholars and postdoctoral associates here at Duke. The goals are to improve participants' competencies in leadership, self-awareness, communication, critical thinking, and interdisciplinary teamwork. And one of the experiences that you will have if you choose to apply and are selected for the Emerging Leaders Institute is you will get experience in project management and interdisciplinary teamwork. You will complete self-assessments to learn more about your strengths, your preferences, and your opportunities for professional growth as a leader. You will also receive individual professional development coaching as part of the program. You will have opportunities to practice and develop your communication skills, both written and spoken. And you'll also receive a certificate of completion, as well as, perhaps more importantly, a foundation for a long-term commitment to professional development. Our facilitators bring a variety of experiences and expertise to the program. Anthony LaFalle works in a business school executive education context and works on program design and client engagement in that perspective. And he works with executives in industry every day as part of his job in designing effective leadership programs and professional development programming. Kristen Murphy is now Senior Director and Head of the Change Management and Adoption Center of Excellence at Parexel. And she is someone with really a broad background in leadership and change management and organizational development expertise, who comes from an industry background, but of course was herself a graduate student in the past as a PhD. And then I am the third facilitator for the program and bring about 15 years of experience in graduate student professional development to the program. So in terms of expectations that we have for the participants, these are considerations for those of you who are thinking of applying to the program. We are planning to hold the sessions in person on West Campus. If university's restrictions change those plans, we will of course abide with all university restrictions and maintain compliance with those, but we do plan to hold the sessions in person, masked, if those are the university requirements at that time. So those will be on West Campus. We hope at the libraries is where we're hoping to hold the program. So we will expect that you will plan for in-person participation on all 5 of those sessions. They are on Friday afternoons from 12:30 to 4:30 p.m. And the 5 session dates that we are planning for 2022 are January 21st and 28th, February 11th and 18th, and with a final session on March 18th. And you will see if you choose to apply to the program, we do ask you to go ahead and block off those dates on your calendar at the point of application to make sure that you'll be available for them should you be selected. So a little more detail now about what is expected of the participants. I mentioned that you'll receive results from 3 assessments about your strengths, preferences, and opportunities for growth. So we do expect you to complete those outside the session meeting time. You and your teammates will meet with me twice on kind of team project progress meetings during the course of the 2 months that the program takes place. Those can be virtual meetings. They don't have to be in person. Just have to find a mutually agreeable time with your teammates. And then you will also complete an individual professional development coaching session. And that again can be virtual. And that will be held with one of the program facilitators who will complete that coaching with you. So you will, when you come into the ELI program, you will be assigned to be a part of an interdisciplinary team, and you will complete a team project during the period of the program. And the project theme will be some element that improves the Duke University experience for graduate students and postdocs. And the program will conclude with that March 18th session with the teams presenting their projects and deliverables at that point to share their project completion. And you're going to hear a little bit more about those projects as we go forward, particularly from our alumni who are on the call. But I'll just share some kind of broad contours right now of some examples of projects that past teams have executed. So one team noticed that time management is a perpetual challenge for graduate students and postdocs. And they thought it would be helpful to compile a set of resources addressing common time management challenges for grad students and postdocs. But they also realized that grad students and postdocs may not even have time to reflect on what their greatest time management challenge is, right? We're so crunched for time. And so they also created kind of a little diagnostic tool that would help you identify your area of greatest challenge. And then that would direct you straight to the resources that could help you address that challenge. So that is a resource that one team created. Another team identified that mentoring is a very important part of the success of graduate students and postdocs at Duke, but maybe is not always front of mind in the way that it should be. And so they designed a mentoring calendar that would keep mentoring visually in front of us throughout the year. And they solicited artwork from the Duke community to include in the calendar. So you'll see original artwork and quotations and inspiration about mentoring, as well as some more granular kinds of strategies to use in building successful mentoring relationships. And the team's vision was that this would be shared broadly across Duke. Unfortunately, this was one of the teams from the 2020 program year. And so they launched their project just at the point when everyone went home and was no longer looking at their office walls. So that was the main impediment to that project moving forward, was the inconvenient timing of the global pandemic. Another team saw that there were more opportunities for collaboration and just relationships between international graduate students and postdocs and domestic students and postdocs. And they ended up approaching International House to see how they could be of help. And it turned out International House had a program called the International Friends Program that had lain dormant for a few years just because of some policy changes that had affected their ability to recruit for the program. And so this team conducted some surveys and focus groups to try to identify where were some obstacles to recruitment to help rejuvenate this program and share it broadly across the Duke community so that it could be revived and recreate this vital source of connection between international and domestic grad students and postdocs. Another team thought about how difficult it was to understand health insurance. And they said, this is a problem for domestic students, but also pretty acutely for international students, because the US system of healthcare is so atomized and different than probably the countries where they're coming from. And so they thought it would be helpful, and they thought this based on talking to the staff at a student health center and other stakeholders around campus, that students and postdocs might use Duke resources better if they understood better what Duke Health Insurance provided. And of course, their project had an extra element of challenge because graduate students have one kind of health insurance access and postdocs have a different kind of health insurance access because they're employees. And then this overachieving team also translated their materials into Spanish and I believe Mandarin to increase access as well. So they had 6 different versions of this guide that they created. Another team, and you're going to hear from several alumni of this team today, looked at some of the challenges around mentoring on campus and created an action plan to address those challenges, complete with directing readers straight to resources that could help them address some of those challenges and obstacles. And I'll let the members of that team say more about it when we feature them in a moment. And then another team, and we have a panelist from this team as well today, looked at how can we highlight different ways that graduate students can take care of themselves, graduate students and postdocs take care of themselves with well-being resources. And so they started a social media presence called Wellness for Researchers, and they had begun their campaign of sharing resources and were envisioning a future time in which they would ask members of the campus community to share ways that they were staying well when the pandemic hit. And then they pivoted to share ways to stay well while at home. And actually those wellness resources became even more important when the pandemic started. And then last but not least, I'll just mention a resource that has evolved over several iterations. A few years ago, a team identified some challenges in finding out what are the resources and what are the processes available to me if I think I may be experiencing harassment or discrimination. And they said, grad students and postdocs don't always have these resources at hand, and they're not always familiar with where to go and what to do in these situations. And so this project eventually became a project that a student in the Nicholas School took on and created a more formal kind of flow chart and interactive tool. And then the graduate school took that and morphed it again into something that would be relevant to students across disciplines. So there are some of these projects that actually get taken up and implemented across the institution. So you really have the chance with these team projects to make a difference and make Duke a better place for postdocs and for graduate students. So I think that's one of the really exciting elements of the team project experience. It's also one of the challenges because you've got 8 weeks and a limited time, and you're probably working with a group of folks that you haven't met before. And so it's an exciting kind of challenge. So thinking about the team project, you probably will have about 5 hours a week in addition to the session meeting time that you're going to be spending on the team project. That is the number that I've been told by past participants is kind of a good ballpark, up to 5 hours a week. Prior to coming into the program, You will do stakeholder interviews with 5 people who have an interest in graduate student and postdoc experience at Duke. And so you should budget a little bit of time between the time that you apply, the time that you're notified of acceptance, which will be by January 12th, and then the first session, which will be on January 21st. And those stakeholder interviews will inform your team's choice of project and how you approach that project in terms of implementing it over about the 8 weeks that the program lasts. We can accept up to 20 total participants, including up to 5 postdocs to the program. And those applications are due on Tuesday, January 4th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern. And I want to just pause for a moment here and point out that my colleague Molly Starback from the Office of Postdoctoral Services is on the call with us today. Thank you so much to Molly and the postdoc office for being a co-sponsor of the Emerging Leaders Institute. So in a nutshell, for your application, you will submit either a CV or a resume, and then the answers to 3 essay questions. And you will submit those in a Qualtrics survey, which is open now. In terms of being competitive in the application, and I saw some questions about this in the registration for today, the selection committee will look for a commitment to professional development connected with your career goals, whatever those are. Showing that there's a clear connection between what your goals are and what the ELI program is designed to provide. And then we are also looking for applicants who have a clear vision of themselves as leaders. And I want to define this a little bit more. You do not need to have a leadership title in order to see yourself as a leader. You may be a leadership in your department, your program, your research group, a student group, or the postdoc association, right? But you may also show ways in which you demonstrate leadership without necessarily being out in front, okay? And so that's perfectly possible. And we've had many people successfully apply to the program who do not have a leadership title or formal role. All right. The essay questions are up on the website, and I'm not going to belabor them here, but we're happy to take questions about those today when we get to the Q&A. All right, so before I introduce our panel, I want to just pause and thank them so much for their willingness to be here. I'm so excited to introduce our panelists for today, and I'm going to see if I can bring them up as I introduce them. So Kevin Erning is a PhD student in biomedical engineering. Dr. Asya Gusa is a postdoctoral scholar in molecular genetics and microbiology. Courtney C.J. Johnson is a PhD student in chemistry. And Wilderson Medina is a PhD student in environment. And hopefully my prowess with Zoom has allowed me to make them all visible to all of you. We're so glad to have all of you. So we have some questions that were shared from folks in the registration survey. And what I'd like to do is actually, I'm going to ask our panelists, and maybe starting with Kevin in the order in which I introduced you, to share a little bit about yourself and what made you apply to the Emerging Leaders Institute. What brought you to Eli? So Kevin, we'll start with you.
Yeah, hello everyone. As Melissa's introduced, my name is Kevin. I'm a biomedical engineering PhD student, fourth year right now, but I signed up for the program because actually someone else in my lab, Yining Liu, who's also a BME PhD student, highly recommended the program for me. she was raving about how it was like a really great opportunity to be very self-reflective, really learning about yourself and how that impacts you as a person and a leader, and kind of like working the kinks out, especially earlier on, right? In a very safe and encouraging environment. And I was like, I need that. Sometimes it's very hard for a PhD student to really have the time to just like sit still and kind of like do a lot of self-reflection, because a lot of times you're just like, I need to run my experiments, or I need to write this manuscript, or I need to like take classes, right? And so I think forcing myself to dedicate time to do that, especially with the support of like these great instructors um, and peers who kind of help you along the journey, is, I guess, invaluable for me. And that's why I signed up for it.
Thanks so much, Kevin. Asya.
Yes, definitely. So my name is Asya Gusa, a postdoctoral researcher, and actually a senior postdoc now. I'm looking for faculty positions, but I did have the goal in mind of running my own lab eventually. And I definitely envision myself as a leader in whatever I do, even just in my everyday experiences in the lab. I try to present myself and be a source of keeping the group moving forward always. So I knew that doing an ELI seemed like it was an amazing experience to be able to learn what kind of attributes that I have as a leader, or how I could grow those attributes. And also working within a group context with people that were from different backgrounds. I thought that was a really exciting opportunity to do something that also benefited both graduate students and postdoc, their experience at Duke. And so, it ended up being all of those things. And I had just an amazing experience with my team, but also really recognizing other qualities of leadership in other people. And that was super beneficial to recognize you don't have to do it all yourself. You can delegate and you can rely on people to come through for you. And so I really appreciate the experience.
Thanks, Asya. CJ.
Hi, I'm CJ, and I'm a senior PhD candidate in chemistry. And what really attracted me to the ELI program is I'm intending to pursue an academic career track as well. And I definitely kind of noticed that it's not really baked into the curriculum how to improve yourself as a leader when it's so critical to running your own lab. And so one of the things that appealed to me about this program is I tried to self-study on my own, reading a bunch of books and stuff, but I wanted a way to connect the theory that I kind of taught myself with practice in kind of a safe space, because anytime you're doing like a real project, something is kind of on the line. And so this was a great way to learn more, to apply what I was learning, and to have the ability to have the opportunity to practice with nothing critical on the line. And it was a fantastic experience. So I highly endorse this program.
Thank you, CJ. Will.
Hi everyone. My name is Will. I'm PhD candidate in the environment program. So I was particularly invited by a friend of mine from the chemistry department, and we participated in the program. We enjoyed that, and what particularly was interested for us was, or at least for me, was trying to experience this leadership part that I had before, but I need to develop better in my career, in my academic career, and also professionally. So as a second language, also you want to try, like English, you want to try to communicate that better to others. So it was a great opportunity just to share and to work on these skills that you need to like offer to others. And also, as Asya says, it was the opportunity to know that others have this kind of leadership that you can just delegate and share any kind. There is no only one way to be a leader, but there are many other ways.
Fantastic. Thank you, Will. So one of the questions that we had from folks who registered for today's session was, what tips or advice could you share for preparing the application? So does anybody have any wisdom to share? Maybe we could start with Kevin and just do the same order again, and then I promise I'll shake it up after.
Sounds good. So you will definitely have a lot of time for self-reflection baked into the program, but I think the application process is a good self-reflection period because it does ask questions where it asks you like, okay, how do you see yourself as a leader? What kind of like traits do you see yourself, and how can the ELI help, I guess, benefit you in developing those traits, right? So it's a lot of just kind of sitting down, figuring out, okay, as a person, this kind of the kind of person I am. These are the things that I feel like I've gotten, you know, from like past leadership opportunities, and how do I want to grow those things? And so I would say just definitely spend time to do a lot of self-reflection, trying to figure out, I guess, what you kind of want to do post PhD or postdoc, and kind of tying that together with like, okay, what are the skills that I'm missing, and how can ELI kind of fill that gap or fill in that niche?
Yeah, and to follow up on that, I wasn't sure at the time. I may not have known exactly what I wanted to do yet, and I think that's kind of tough to decipher, even as a postdoc and a graduate student school. You almost never know what you exactly want to do next. But maybe you just go ahead and choose where you're kind of leaning and kind of go with that, maybe, and so you can fully develop what kind of attributes and things you'd be looking for. That might help you in the application process. I think I did just kind of have to narrow it, even though I hadn't fully decided, and just really talk about how, because all these things that can be applied to multiple different routes that you might go. So don't be too concerned if you don't know exactly what you're doing yet, but just kind of choose and follow through.
Yeah, I think for me, when I was applying, I wanted to really explicitly connect the kind of goals of the program to my own goals. So I thought about how I had pursued professional development. And even though I wasn't formally a leader in any capacity, as kind of, as Asia alluded to, I had been kind of, I'd been acting as a peer leader in the lab. And I also thought about things that I'd done that maybe didn't show up on my CV. Things like, here are the efforts that I took to learn more about leadership. It doesn't show up on my CV, but it shows that I've been engaged in developing as a leader and professional development. And so I thought about things that I had done that would maybe fit into that category that I could highlight in my essays that didn't appear on my CV. So that's what I recommend, is think about how have you tried to develop professionally outside of the lab.
Yeah, I think that from my side, I would say that like trying to be very, very honest in what is what do you have currently, and also think like my partners just said, it was trying to think what do you want for your CV and also for your personal life. Maybe there are some different stages in leadership, and you can just identify right now what stage are you and what stage you want to reach after the program. So that's that's very simple, and I think that is going to be very helpful.
Thank you so much, everybody. I will add to that, if you are truly feeling like you are not certain what direction you want to follow in terms of career path, it is okay to say that. You don't have to foreclose the decision. Certainly, people in the past have had the opportunity to learn more about themselves and reflect on where they really like to spend their time. And that has proven useful in thinking about their particular career path, as well as opportunities for leadership in that path. So you don't have to know what it is you want to do when you finish your PhD or master's degree or your postdoc in order to apply, for sure. All right, so I'm going to turn things upside down and start with Will this time, and we'll just go backwards. So someone said, I would like to know a little bit more about the nature of the group projects. What types of projects are they, and how time intensive will they be when taking normal lab activities into account?
So yeah, I think that they are very diverse in terms of what do you want to achieve. The thing that was very interesting is that we kind of gather in small groups and just trying to identify what are the main like problems or issues around your academic context. And once you identify those problems, you just go and try to solve in some way those issues, but at the same time try to be aware of your like working in self-awareness of how do you develop your skills so the projects are up to the group. They could be as exhaustive as your group wants to do, but I think that in general you need just to devote time to these projects, because it's not only developing your skills, but also helping to develop others' skills. So, but at the end, it's just it could be variable, and also it depends also in what are the focus of your group. For example, we work with Kevin, with Asia, and they are kind of similar in careers, background. I'm biologist. My background is biology, but at the end, our focus are kind of somehow different at the end. So our specialties particularly are kind of different. So each of us brought us like different perspective of the issue on how to solve the issues. So I think that is just trying to understand your group, and once you understand your group, you kind of focus on how like difficult or not can be your project.
Yeah, I would definitely, I mean, it's a non-zero commitment for sure. I would say it's probably a few hours a week. My team personally, we would have like a 1 hour meeting, and then we would all kind of get together and figure out what our tasks were going to need to be to move the project forward, and then be like a couple hours a week from there. But you do get out of something what you put into it, and I felt like it was very manageable. It probably would not have been quite like if I was taking a ton of other classes. It might have been harder, but like I felt like where I was within my research, that I was pretty easily able to basically slot that in, and it was so worth the time commitment. So it wasn't like an extreme amount of time or anything. But it is non-zero. That's how I would describe it.
Yeah, I know for myself, I felt fairly overwhelmed at the commitment at the beginning when the project scope was kind of explained to us, and you get caught up on this deliverable that you have to present. I was feeling like, oh my gosh, how are we going to find the time? We had like some lofty goals initially that we set for ourselves, and then as we started talking about it, someone just sort of made the realization, it's really not about the end product in the end. It's about our process and our journey. So we ended up scaling back our project to make it more manageable. And we talked about what were our time commitments? What could we really put into the project? And some of us were able to put a little bit more time, and some of us were not able to put as much time. And once we were really honest with our with what we felt like we could contribute, what we had time for, I think it really came together nicely, and because we realized our limitations, and that was really part of the process also, was effective communication. And we realized we wanted to get out of the experience a learning experience along the journey, and the deliverable was less important.
To kind of echo what Asia was saying, yeah, initially it seemed very overwhelming, right? Because you hear these numbers where it's the entire afternoon on a Friday, and you have like this meetings, you have to deliver a project and everything. But I would say, just kind of echo what Asia was saying, communicating earlier on, kind of like your availability in terms of time, because I think we did a fairly good job being able to like work around people's availabilities, making sure that, you know, if we do have like 1.5 hours to meet weekly outside of the ELI program, that we use that as effectively as possible. So learning to like, okay, kind of discussing early on, like, these are the things we've got to do during this meeting, these are the decisions you have to make, and making sure that we have a summary of like, okay, this is our to-do list for the next meeting, and making sure that, you know, we scale the project based on people's times. Obviously, as a master's student, as a PhD student or a postdoc, you have other things going on. And there are days where I'm like, hey, I work in a wet lab specifically dealing with animal work, so I might not be able to come in as early, or I might be late to some things. And just making sure that, you know, if I do have that planned out already, that I communicate that earlier on, and people can help me when I don't have quite the time that week, but then I can also help cover for other people who might not have the time the following week. So it is as flexible as you make it to be, as long as you could communicate it earlier on with your team.
And one more thing I wanted to add to that is those Friday afternoon sessions, the 4 hours, they're really enjoyable. Like I really enjoyed that time. It's just dedicated time to be able to interact with people and reflect on your own self. You just don't get that kind of dedicated, time to set aside for yourself and really develop. And they really make the sessions entertaining. And there was food. I hope there'll be food also. So anyway, those are really enjoyable. I think we got a little bit, stressed out because of the project aspect, but those times are really just about you and just really enjoying time with your ELA teammates and classmates.
Thank you, Asya. I will say about food, we would love to provide food. We're still trying to figure that out within the library's guidelines and restrictions. I think they are not allowing food right now, so we'll figure something out. We'll figure something out. All right, so let's just use the same order again, starting with Will. What has been the greatest skill set or tool you feel you got from your ELI experience?
I think that the part of the communication skills, like I would say maybe trying to better communicate things is one of the skill sets that I got from the program. That's being said is trying to, like, it was in collaboration with my team, because they understood what are my limitations and they try to improve that. Like, it was not only I need to focus on myself, but also trying to be what are the needs of others. And also I think that something that I really liked was about the different psychological tests that kind of give you the idea of what kind of leader are you, that you are not only enclosed into one set of leadership, or if you have this idea of the big model of a leader just governing over others and try to be the best on everything. And I think that that was something that particularly like I just love that, because I realized I can be a leader even if sometimes I'm maybe very, very shy to show up in some things. But I think that gave me the idea of I can be a leader, and I can just focus my leadership in ideas, in how to think better about some processes that we need to figure out to solve things. So I think that that's part of the skill sets I just like from the program.
I think the most valuable thing for me was what I learned about identifying the different strengths in people, and how having balance in those strengths can help make a team really powerful. So if you know a person who is very good at one type of thing, and you recognize that in them, and you basically have them do that type of thing, not only does the thing get done really well, but that person feels uniquely valued. And then when you have multiple people on a team who have different strengths, and everybody has their own part and feels valued, it's really powerful. And I learned that in Eli, and I use it now that I'm in kind of more of a leadership role, and it's really effective and really powerful. So I like that I learned that from Eli.
Yeah, and I would just like to second and third what Will and CJ both remarked on. That was the highlight for me as well. But I'll just say another highlight then was also, I was introduced, I think, for the first time to Slack and these tools, these online tools for building a group project and following through, like developing to-do tasks. And what was it, Kevin, was there another tool that we were using during our project that I've forgotten what it was called, but I was introduced, what was it called?
It like automatically, yep, Trello.
Trello, that's what it was. And I actually did use that on a separate project with a group. So just tools that I wasn't even familiar with that made our communication amongst our group, and also being able to see where people were in their progress. That was super valuable. And I wouldn't have known about those tools before the program.
I guess to second, third, and fourth what everyone else is saying, but kind of like give you my spin on it, is that, you know, usually when we, especially, I guess I'm speaking for myself as a STEM PhD student, whenever I'm presented with like a group project, I'm always like, okay, what do we have to do? What do we have to do? And then kind of just focusing on the actual project itself, but not really taking the time to learn the different people in my team and kind of like their strengths. And so kind of learning to like allocate earlier on in any group setting or any group project setting where I'm like, okay, I need to figure out what kind of people and strengths that people can contribute so that we could leverage those strengths, right? Because sometimes, especially during a time constraint collaboration or project, all you really focus on is the project, but you don't really take advantage of people's like competitive advantage. And I really want to make sure that, you know, we do that and make sure that they are recognized for contributing their strengths to a project.
Thank you all so much for sharing those perspectives. The next question is a little more targeted and focused. It is, what is the right time to participate in the ELI? If you're a PhD student, should you wait until after prelims? If you're a postdoc, is it better to do it early or late? Does anybody have any opinions on this? And I'll let just people speak as they're moved if they have a strong opinion about it.
Yeah, particularly for me, I have learned like different programs are very variable in their agendas and their focus, that sometimes before, for example, before your prelims, you are very busy taking courses, preparing for the prelims, and after that, many times, at least in my program, is just you are kind of free of taking courses and just focus on your project. Particularly for me, I just took that, like I just joined the program before my prelims. It was very helpful actually, because I understood better my advisor, the relationship between my advisor and myself, and also particularly how can I just, based on that experience, be better mentor for other students now that I am a TA. But it could vary depending on the program you are.
I think for me, I hit the stride right in the middle of my postdoc experience, and I think that was good for me. So I already had gotten my project kind of established, but I could take some time away from it. I wasn't intensely writing a paper at the time, or completing some critical experiments that were time intensive, because this program does take up a significant, like, don't underestimate the amount of time you'll commit to this program. 10 hours a week may not sound like much, but in reality, you're thinking about the project also, and you're coordinating when you're going to meet. And it took up a lot more time than I really had anticipated. But I was warned that going into the program. I think that when you're focused on like a job search or anything like that, that can be kind of distracting. So I don't know, I would probably recommend sometime in the middle of wherever you are, where you have a little bit of, mostly when your mentor or whoever your lab PI is allowing you to have that kind of time away from your main research, because I do think that you need that support of your mentor or your lab to be able to take the time away, and they have to also be committed to you taking that time away.
Great, thank you all. And I will say for postdocs, you do need to have that explicit support from your PI to take that time away from the lab. Graduate students in the past have had a variety of different approaches to talking with their PI or advisor about participating in the program. And part of the reason that it's on Friday afternoons is so that students who don't feel comfortable having that conversation may have the option of flying under the radar, as it were.
I could speak a little bit on that. So I actually told my PI and I planned it out with her, but as most busy PIs are, they probably forget halfway through that I have this other commitment, and just to like learning to manage that. And I feel like my advice is the non-advice, because I don't think there's like the perfect time to do it for me, because when I did the program in spring of 2020, I was also preparing my prelim for my prelim exam. And right before that, I was wrapping up a manuscript, and then I was also busy like right after that. And so it's kind of one of those things where there will never be like the perfect convenient time for you, but just trying to make sure that, during that time, does it work with what you have going on? I didn't want to do it while I was writing a manuscript, and so I kind of pushed it a bit forward, and it worked out really great since we started in January. But sometimes it does get really busy, right? And it's just kind of like you planning it out to make sure that you have time to dedicate for this, but also not making sure that other things aren't suffering. And if things will suffer, that I communicate early, especially to my boss, and be like, okay, I might not be able to like do this big experiment, but I'll do it like this other time, and making sure like I provide solutions and not just like, hey, I just can't do it, right? I don't want to use ELI as an excuse for what I can't do, but I want to make sure that I provide her a reason and a solution as to how I will circumnavigate that.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt was there are kind of higher intensity periods and lower intensity periods. And if you can do it in one of those lower intensity periods where you can make sure that you have the time to focus on the program, that I felt like it worked out really well for me to do it that way. So for me, that was after my prelim, so where I wasn't working on any manuscript or anything.
Thank you all for sharing that perspective. I think we have really done a fabulous job. All the panelists have done a fabulous job of addressing a lot of the questions that came in through the registration. So I want to open things up and see if folks have questions that they'd like to ask the panelists right now. Feel free to either put those in the chat, or you can use the raise hand feature under reactions if you'd like to just jump in and have a conversation with them. I apologize. I'm not sure who S Blocker is, but please go ahead.
My mic is working.
It is.
Okay, excellent. So this is actually just happens to be kind of perfect timing with the last question. I think this is probably going to be geared a bit more toward our resident postdoc here, as I am a postdoc. So I am planning to apply, of course, for this next cycle, but I do have a pretty major grant deadline in March, as well as multiple papers that I'm planning to submit. Wanted your thoughts on that, or if perhaps waiting till the next cycle might be a wise choice.
What year, like, will you have another year? Like, could you apply next year?
Probably not, actually.
Probably not. Oh, that's tough, because I also recently submitted a grant like for a K99 award.
That's what I'm doing, K99.
Ooh. Do you think you would exclusively be able to work on the K99 and this ELI? And
well, those aren't my only jobs. So
I mean, that would be really, really tough. I mean, the K99 was so, I literally spent like 6 months dedicated. And at some point my mentor was just like, don't even worry about experiments in the lab, just work on this. It was so.
No, I do have to continue experiments on, but this is a resubmission, to be fair.
Oh, okay. Bit different then. So maybe it wouldn't be as time intensive. Yeah, I mean, it's really just about, you got to block out the time. And again, you can be honest with your group. As long as you have that dedicated time on the Friday afternoons, be honest with your group that you're in, you have a lot of other things, but you really need this professional development time. I mean, I would say, regardless of what's going on and what you're trying to accomplish, this is really time well spent in just and again, we don't get these kinds of opportunities. They just don't really exist. This is like so if you can get into the program, I would still highly recommend doing it.
Yeah, no, I think it's the kind of thing where I would absolutely want to be able to dedicate the time. More than anything, I don't want to take up an application slot if as a postdoc who's been through both processes, both this opportunity as well as the application for a K99 process. If you feel like they are completely incompatible, I don't want to waste anybody's time, really, more than
that's very honest. Yeah, I mean, if it's a resubmission and you have very targeted parts of the grant that you're working on to improve, I think you could do it. I do think you
Okay.
can do it. It was overwhelming for me as my first time doing it. So that's why I would say no if it's your first time writing. But no, I think it's doable, and it's really valuable to invest this time in yourself.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the question, and to Asya for the answer. Molly, is there anything you would want to add? You've known postdocs who participated in this program over the years. Do you have any advice you'd want to add to that? You're muted.
Sorry. I wouldn't be able to make that decision for anyone. I would say that you need to think about what's most important for your career. And it's a decision of your time, right? And a K-99, if you are wanting to have that traditional tenure track academic career, that's going to move you to the top of the heap, right? So it's about, life's about choices. That's about all I have to say.
Fair enough. Thanks, Molly. Great. I see a question also from Carolyn.
Yeah, thank you so much. This whole event has already cleared up so many of my questions, so it's been super helpful so far. There was just one thing that I was wondering about that, Melissa, that you mentioned earlier, which is that there are stakeholder interviews and that those somehow have something to do with the project finding process. And I was just wondering if you could maybe describe that a little bit. I was a little unclear of what that exactly means. Thank you.
Sure, of course. I'm glad to say a little bit about it, and then panelists, feel free to fill in where you think it might be helpful too. So you'll receive these questions from me upon your acceptance into the program. But there are basically questions about what is going well in the Duke University experience for graduate students and postdocs, what could be improved, where do you see that there are some gaps and opportunities. And the stakeholders are simply people who have an investment in the graduate student and postdoc experience at Duke. So they could be your fellow graduate students, they could be your fellow postdocs, they could be faculty, they could be staff, alumni, employers, community members who have connections to Duke, people in the Durham area. So it really could be anybody who has a stake in graduate education, postdoctoral training experiences at Duke, who can inform and just share perspectives on where are some opportunities where things could be even better at Duke. And panelists, is there something you want to add to clarify that?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Just to give you like an example of who I reached out to. So the project that you guys have been hearing about is kind of like, doesn't just come out from nothing. We actually, as all ELI participants, come together to kind of identify what are the needs based on our interviews. And so we were kind of like doing the background research, kind of trying to gather primary sources. So I talked to the director of graduate studies in my department. I talked to the dean in Pratt or engineering and international house, basically people who have a sense of like what's going on for masters, PhDs, and postdocs to basically train easier at the university. And each person, having interviewed 5 people, you know, have identified several things that might be important to work on. And so we, as ELI, the ELI group, put everything down on Post-its on the wall. At least this was how we used to do it. We did it, and then we kind of like aggregate things based on similarities and identify from there what would be like a meaningful gap to fulfill or niche to work on.
Yeah, and I'll just mention too that when I was a little bit confused by the assignment when initially, because you do this before you even have your first meeting. But I ended up interviewing a graduate student about their experience, a postdoc about their experience at Duke, and then also the chair of my department and a dean in the Duke graduate school. And I actually tried to target people that I've kind of wanted to have a conversation with, but you know, to just get exposure, especially to the chair of our department and then to the dean. And you can choose who you interview with, and you actually have a purpose, and you'll get to talking about about other things and you'll learn about resources that you didn't know about. So yeah, I would definitely choose those interviews carefully because it's a chance just to network and start building your profile, raising your profile.
Carolyn, I hope that leaves you feeling a little bit more grounded in what those stakeholder interviews are like. Great, excellent. So it looks like we have time for maybe one additional question. I've learned to always wait a little extra because it takes folks a little while to type a question into the chat, a little more than just raising their hands. All right. Perfect. Well, hopefully we have had a chance to answer the most burning questions that were at the top of your mind. I'm going to share my screen one more time just to share a little bit of information with everyone on some additional resources that are available to you. If you are a graduate student and you have questions about the ELI program, you can reach out to me. If you are a postdoc and you have questions about your participation in ELI, Molly Starback, the director of the Office of Postdoctoral Services, is a contact for you. And then, of course, the graduate school's website and the ELI website in particular has information about past participants. In particular, if you want to see who has participated in the program in the past, and maybe if they're from your department, you might want to talk with them, as well as you can have access to blog posts that have been shared by past project teams about their experiences. So I hope that all of those are resources that you will take advantage of as you contemplate whether the ELI program could be the right program for you and how you might want to prepare your application. At this point, I want to wrap us up with a warm round of virtual applause for our wonderful panelists who are alumni of the program. Thank you so much to Kevin, to Asya, to CJ, and to Will for sharing your perspective with us today. And I want to thank all of you in the audience for joining us. We look forward to another very strong set of applications for the 2022 Emerging Leaders Institute. Take good care, everyone.